Okay. Okay, OBS is fine. Looks like we're up. Yes. Okay. All right. Good. Just double check this. And all looks okay. All right. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. What are we doing here? Welcome to you all. Where are you? There you are. And good. Welcome also to those of you watching online. We've had a long interruption to our usual satsanga. We'll try to get it restarted here today. And as always, we'll be taking questions both from our online students and from our local students. We have a lot of nice questions here, so let me start here. Okay. Yeah, looks okay. Good. So first question here is from Mahendra. Mahendra lives in Fresno, California. A question with regard to the Mahabharata teaching on Satyam, Priyam, and Hitam. Some of you know this topic. We call it Vak Tapas. Vak Tapas is a practice of choosing carefully what you speak, and the choice is guided by three criteria. Whatever you say should be Satyam, it should be true, shouldn't be untrue. It should be Priyam, not Priya. Priyam means pleasing, but in context it means don't say anything hurtful, right? And then finally, Hitam. Hitam means beneficial, and that's what Mahendra's question is about. He says, I understand that something is true and pleasant, but what if it's not beneficial? Like gossip, he correctly says. So he says it's a challenge then when I'm in social gatherings among friends. Honestly, I have little interest in such gatherings, but I try to follow Dharma, and I try to minimize harm and not hurt the feelings. So when I try to engage sincerely, most conversations with friends tends to drift towards gossip. All right, I struggle how to deal with this. That's really a very good, I think it's a very insightful question. Satyam and Priyam are pretty obvious. Satyam, we shouldn't use, nice modern English expression, we weaponize what we say. And for the sake of weaponization of our words, Satyam is the first casualty. So what we say should, as a minimum, it should be true. Then further, it should be Priyam, again, not pleasing, not that we have to say only nice things to people, but it should not be deliberately hurtful or harmful. These two are obvious. So what about this Hitam part and the problem with gossip? So, first of all, gossip is usually hurtful. Real gossip is harmful. So it violates that Priyam part. You're talking about someone and you're injuring that person indirectly if you're gossiping about someone else. And gossip is not harmless. What we really call gossip, he or she did this and did that and did that kind of thing, that is absolutely harmful. So let's set gossip aside. How about just chit-chat? Talking about the weather is a very common thing, and I think not just in King, test. All right. Boy, all kinds of strange problems today. Those batteries, when I put them in, were fine. Go figure. Anyway, let's come back to this. Hitam. So to make idle chit-chat, to talk about the weather. By the way, politics is also not suitable anymore because it'll lead to hurt feelings. And we live in such a divisive time. So politics is not usually a safe topic unless you're just set that aside. So what about talking about the weather? Now, you would say, I think Mahendra's conclusion is it's not beneficial, so why should I even bother engaging in this idle chit-chat? Well, wait a minute. Idle chit-chat is beneficial. Think about it. Think like a sociologist thinks. To talk about weather and silly things is social bonding. You're making the other person feel comfortable. You're making the other person feel heard by you. You're interested in the other person. So I would say that idle chit-chat indeed is hitam. It's beneficial. So if you're at a party, and this becomes a challenge though for Mahendra and other Vedantins. I remember having this problem when I was young. I would go to a social gathering and I was the odd one out. I would end up sitting in the corner alone. And then so occasionally someone would join me and then we would talk some Vedanta, even in those days. The point is that even in those days I also was uncomfortable with making that small talk, but why not put a little perspective on it? Why not use your small talk to make the other person feel good? Why not engage a person in conversation for the sake of emotional support, encouragement? Make that person feel important enough to you for you to engage the person in discussion. So it may be difficult. It was certainly difficult for me in those. Even today, I'm no good at chit-chat. But you can see in a social situation, to engage others is sadhana. Think of it as your sadhana. Your spiritual practice in that gathering is to engage people and make them feel heard, make them feel important. Okay, next.
This is common. In current time and current events, what's going on?
Yeah, we'll need to use this microphone and then I'll need to put the camera on you. So this is we're live streaming this, so we need to do these other things. Wait just a second. Okay, now go ahead.
So in current events, what's happening in social gathering, it's very common topic about what's happening, and then it leads to politics and current government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the way sometimes discussion goes, it's very difficult to hold yourself back, not contributing or not commenting. I know it's not priyam and definitely not beneficial. So how do you kind of divert out from that conversation?
Don't do it. I mean, this is a place where some discipline is required. If a conversation is going off the rails, shut up. I mean, we just need not participate. You can just stand there and nod your head. So the person who's pro-Trump, you nod your head. The person who's anti-Trump, you nod your head. And make sure you nod your head the same amount. For each one. You're under you're not required to participate. And if it's really off the rails, excuse yourself. Does that make sense? Mm. Yeah, but to allow yourself to be drawn in, pretty common, to allow yourself to be drawn in. Oh, thank you. Thank you. To allow yourself to be drawn in is not sadhana. So we need some alertness there. Okay, next question is from Patrick. Patrick lives in Kentucky. Patrick says, I find that an obstacle to my spiritual growth comes in the form of painful emotional states. When I'm in these states, I feel separate from Ishvara. I slip into pessimistic thinking, feelings of gloom. I gravitate towards old, unhealthy behaviors, overeating, obsessively dwelling on worldly pleasures. I know that these habits take me further from spiritual growth, but I'm unable to stop myself. How can I cultivate healthier patterns of engaging in sadhana instead of turning towards worldly distractions during these periods of emotional distress? Excellent question. So, emotional distress is a huge problem in everyone's life, including the life of sadhakas, like Patrick. But now the question is, how do we respond to these emotional problems? The most common response is to look for a distraction, and that's what Patrick is talking about. So I think for most people, the most common distraction is a television set, right? You go channel surfing and distract yourself, or any number of things which are done as distractions. Some people will come, Patrick didn't mention this, but I know some people do this. Some people turn to spiritual distractions. Didn't think that. You didn't see that one coming, did you? Spiritual distractions. So if you're really emotionally upset, go to the temple. Now, on the surface, that sounds so good. You're really upset, so you go to the temple, and you feel better. You come home, and you feel worse. Go to the temple, you feel better. This is using spiritual means as a distraction. Television can distract you from your emotional distress. Going to a temple can distract you from emotional distress. The issue is, if you have emotional distress, you have to deal with it. There's a reason you have emotional distress. There is an unresolved emotional problem. And by seeking distractions, whether that distraction is watching TV or if that distraction is going to a temple, honestly, it's no different. You are escaping from an emotional problem. You are distracting yourself from an emotional problem rather than dealing with it. So if you have serious emotional problems, and you find you're not able to resolve them on your own, then seek some help. Find a therapist, find some means of dealing with that emotional problem. To watch TV is an obvious distraction, but there's the other problem. There's a nice word for it, going to the temple. It's called spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing means instead of dealing with the emotional problem, you're bypassing it through a spiritual means. Of course, I won't deny going to the temple is preferable to watching TV, but both are equally incapable of really dealing with the problem that you have. Okay, I'll take another question here. This is from Rakesh. Rakesh lives in Livermore in California. There might be other Livermores, but I presume it's California. Advaita teaches that Brahman alone is ultimately real, whereas Ishvara, karma, rebirth, etc., all are within the realm of Maya, transactional reality. Well said. My difficulty is this. If Ishvara, who governs karma and responds with compassion and grace, is not absolutely real in the highest sense, then what is the true status of Ishvara in Advaita Vedanta? Excellent question. By the way, I have at least 1 or 2 videos that deal with this exact question. From a devotional standpoint, the compassionate Lord seems more meaningful than an attributeless Brahman. How should I understand? And it goes on. Okay, that's a really, really good question. How to reconcile the two perspectives of Advaita Vedanta, where Brahman alone is real, and the worldly perspective, where the world is as real as it seems, the world has a creator, etc., etc. Those two perspectives cannot be reconciled. They're not reconcilable. They're two different perspectives. If you're enlightened, then you won't be asking this question, first of all. If you're not enlightened, then you're still dealing with the world, and you still think the world is somewhat real, and the world has a real creator, Ishvara. So here, this is such a common problem, and that is, it's like having 1 foot in each, what do they say, 1 foot in 2 boats is the metaphor. And the boats are drifting apart. And what that symbolizes is thinking about this issue from the standpoint of enlightenment and non-enlightenment simultaneously. You're either enlightened or you're not. Well, let's take each of the cases. If you're enlightened, Ishvara is as real as you and me. I'll say that again. If you are enlightened, Ishvara is as real as you and me. Not absolutely real, but this body has some reality. This mind has some reality. It's not absolute reality. We call it mithya, a dependent reality. It's like the reality of the pot. The pot is not absolutely real, but it's not non-existent. So when I say if you're enlightened, Ishvara is as real as you and me, it's like saying, I know it's clay, but I can still relate to a pot. The fact that there's only clay doesn't negate the appearance and function of pot. This is a correct way of understanding Advaita. So Advaita doesn't negate duality, but rather shifts your perspective on duality, where you can see it just as you. By the way, do you have any problems in simultaneously appreciating that this is both clay and pot? You don't have to be a great philosopher to handle these two perspectives in the same way. Someone who has correctly understood Advaita Vedanta can understand that there is one non-dual Brahman, that's the reality because of which everything exists, and at the same time there is an apparently real world. Notice my choice of words. Not an unreal world. Unreal means non-existent. An apparently real world. In an apparently real world, there are apparently real people like you and me. There's an apparently real planet on which we live. And there's an apparently real Ishvara who governs it all. At that level, it is effortless to keep the relationship. An enlightened person does not lose his or her relationship with Ishvara or anything. It just shifts the perspective in this way. So if you're enlightened, this is the understanding, that there's an apparently real world with an apparently real Ishvara and relationships that are just as valid. The relationship between me and you and the relationship between me or you and Ishvara are equally valid from the standpoint of enlightenment. From the standpoint of not yet being enlightened, there's no problem at all. You take the world as being real, the real world has a real creator, and you have a relationship with that Ishvara. So the problem is not from the standpoint of prior to enlightenment, but the problem is when you have one foot in each of these two realms. So I think I think we've addressed Rakesh's question. I forget which videos, but if you check out the YouTube channel, you find at least several videos that deal with this particular topic. Okay, shall we take a question here in back?
Pranam Swamiji, it's good to see you back in action. And it's good to be back as well, temporarily here. So I would like, it's hard to, I think, phrase this question because of the nature of what it is trying to address. The self-revealing nature of Atma as the source of cognition or the source of awareness rather than the experience of that taking place in the mind. And I think my issue is the mind, especially in meditation, is trying to conceive of or grasp or understand on its terms the nature of Atma, but it cannot. And so how does knowledge take place if Atma is, or if the nature of consciousness is not graspable? What does that maybe feel like in meditation? But there cannot be an experience of it.
Okay.
So what is the experience of the experiencer? But there can't be an experience of it, right? So it's like a circular thing.
I think I get it, and it sounds quite familiar. And it's I think something everyone struggles with, and especially in meditation. You know, the prototypical problem is you're meditating and trying to understand what is consciousness, what is Atma, who am I, and a mind that's not properly guided by these teachings, you'll only get frustrated or confused. The truth is actually surprisingly simple. Right now you're having an experience. I'll start with a metaphor. This might be helpful. Here we have a reality called clay and nama-rupa, name and form, called pot. So there's a reality plus name and form. Let's look at this experience we're having right now. This experience has lots of nama-rupa. Look around, there's all kinds of details, all kinds of duality. The content of the pot is clay. What is the content of this experience? What is it made of? The answer to that question can only be consciousness. This pot exists because of clay. This experience exists because of consciousness. The essence of this pot is clay. The essence of this experience is consciousness. Now, the problem you described is like the pot wants to find the clay. Just to have fun with this metaphor. Doesn't make any sense, right? The pot says, where is clay? Should I meditate and find the clay? if the pot can think. So you can see it's all, that kind of thinking is based on a wrong assumption. An assumption that clay is separate from pot. And here's, I think, the key of your question. The wrong assumption many people have is that Atma is somehow separate from your experience. It's a wrong assumption. Atma cannot be separate from your experience. Atma is the reality because of which you can experience anything at all. Atma is the consciousness, which is the essence of all experience. That applies right now in this class. That applies in meditation. So I'll ask you in a moment if you have a follow-up question, but the issue here is a wrong assumption that Atma is somehow separate from the experience we're having right now. Atma is 100% present in this ordinary experience, present as the consciousness, which is the essence of this experience. Does that work for you? Any follow-up?
Thank you, Swamiji. That does help. I think this might get a little too technical. I remember, over a decade ago, you had taught about akhanda-akara vritti.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just in a Vedanta camp at Arshavidya, and they were talking about jnana vrittis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious what the relationship with that is in terms of what you're saying.
None.
Can you clarify?
So a jnana vritti is a thought that removes ignorance. We're talking about pot. Oh, thank you. So if we're talking about thoughts that remove ignorance, we're talking about nama rupa, we're talking about the pot. What is the relationship between pot and clay? Ultimately, pot is nothing but clay. What is the relationship between any vritti, not just akhanda-akara vritti? What is the relationship between any vritti and consciousness? Pot is nothing but clay. Any thought is nothing but consciousness. Pot is name and form. Any thought is just name and form, nama rupa. Whether it's a thought of your dog, whether it's a thought of what's happening in Washington or Venezuela or whatever is going on in this crazy world, whatever, and whether it's a thought about the nature of Atma being Brahman, akhanda-akara vritti. They're all thoughts. They're all equally thoughts. The akhanda-akara vritti, the so-called jnana vritti, the vritti that makes you enlightened, is not special. It's unique, but your thought of your dog is unique. They're both unique thoughts, but they're both thoughts. And thought, nice definition of thought, is consciousness plus nama rupa. So consciousness plus the nama rupa of your dog is a dog thought. This is, by the way, we're not going here, but this is, you mentioned the akhanda-akara vritti. This is not our topic, but it's just a hint at it. Consciousness plus dog form and name is dog thought. What is consciousness plus Atma? Has no nama rupa. Atma has a name, fine, but no form. So whatever it is, to distinguish that vritti as being capable of removing ignorance of Atma, that's akhanda-akara vritti. So people love to speculate about akhanda-akara vritti, but I think the safest way to approach it is it's like any thought. Does that work for you?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, good. Another question? Okay, I'm going to take some more questions online, if that's okay. We'll stay a little focused here. All right. This next question is from Elizabeth, who lives in California. She asks, Vedanta teaches, let me go down, it's rather long. By the way, when you send questions, maybe hint, hint. Okay. But she's got it broken up in paragraphs, and she's got some paragraphs numbered here, so I can navigate this nicely. So question 1, good questions, by the way. How essential is the karma and rebirth framework to Vedanta's teaching methodology? Can the teachings be meaningfully unfolded by a teacher without relying on the doctrine of karma? Excellent question. And related, if a sincere student remains agnostic about karma and rebirth, would they still be able to assimilate Vedanta properly? I'm so glad Elizabeth has asked these questions. The backstory, and something that Elizabeth has learned, and most of you have also heard from me or elsewhere, and that is the doctrine of karma is a belief system. Means it can't be proved, it can't be disproved. It is not accessible for proof or disproof. Science can't reach it, logic can't reach it. We cannot investigate the truth about whether or not it is true or real or not. What we do say is it's a belief system, and the value of, and this is just an important aside, the value of a belief system is not whether it's true or false. By definition, anything you believe is neither true nor false. It's pending, it's unknown. So the value of a belief is in its utility. Does it help you? And I would definitely argue that a belief in karma, in the doctrine of karma, is far, far preferable to the biblical system of belief. That is, if you die with sin on your soul, you are condemned to hell for all eternity. To me, that's not a healthy belief system. So let's just leave it at this. The doctrine of karma is a belief system, neither provable or disprovable. And then now coming to Elizabeth's question, how essential is it to Vedanta's teaching methodology? It's completely tangential. Not essential, it is tangential, unnecessary. On the other hand, but second part of her question, can these teachings be meaningfully unfolded by a teacher without relying on a doctrine of karma? Can you teach Advaita Vedanta without referring to the doctrine of karma? Absolutely. Watch this. Can a teacher meet the emotional and spiritual needs of a student without resorting to some kind of belief system that helps us navigate the complexities of life? So I think you see where I'm going with this. Even though the doctrine of karma is absolutely tangential to the teachings of Advaita, in a teacher-student relationship, we're dealing with many worldly problems. And those worldly problems have to be understood from some context. And it's helpful to address them from the context of karma. So when a student asks a teacher, the student says, "Why me?" So if you are a student of the Bible, God is punishing you. That's what the Bible says. God is punishing you. And if you're from a Hindu orientation or a Vedanta orientation, then we can explain it through the doctrine of karma. I'll say then it is helpful. The doctrine of karma is not central at all to the doctrine of karma. In fact, here's something to reflect on. Suppose the ancient rishis lived in a culture that didn't believe in the doctrine of karma. then they would have taught the Vedanta in a they would not have referred to they would have referred to God punishing yours, whatever would have been their belief system, they would have put the teachings in that context. So we can say that the doctrine of karma is part of an ancient religious context. And here we're making a very distinct division between spiritual teachings and religious teachings. And it's not hard to make that distinction. Spiritual teachings, at least from the standpoint of Vedanta, spiritual teachings deal with truths, realities. Religious teachings deal with matters of belief. So, Vedanta deals with matters of truth, the truth of Atma, the truth of Brahman, the truth of non-duality. Doctrine of karma deals with matters of faith, matters of belief. So to summarize all that, actually just to her second question, if a sincere student remains agnostic, will Vedanta work? Absolutely. On the other hand, you still need to deal with the world. If you can deal with the world in a healthy manner, without believing in the doctrine of karma, there's no problem whatsoever. None. The question is, can you deal with the world in a healthy way? That's really the issue. In my opinion, the doctrine of karma is very helpful in that regard. But if it doesn't help you, then fine. Use whatever helps you deal with worldly problems. Okay. Next question from Ahmad. Ahmad is actually, he's a medical doctor who lives in Vancouver, Canada. And Ahmad asks, how do we find meaning and joy in life after waking up to the higher truth of impermanence and witnessing everything from the lens of consciousness, which means nothing is real? I find that waking up breaks the immersion in life that used to bring me so much joy and also suffering. Okay. So I find this a fascinating question. There's a problem I find, though, with his use of the word waking up, because the word waking up sometimes implies enlightenment, and I don't think that's what he's talking about. He says waking up to the higher truth of impermanence. Waking up, if waking up means enlightenment, enlightenment means waking up to the truth of permanence, Brahman, an unchangeable reality, the unchangeable reality of your essential nature as consciousness. Consciousness unborn, uncreated, unchanging, and therefore absolutely unaffected by any problems due to your body, due to your mind, due to your mother-in-law, due to politics, whatever it is. Consciousness is immutable. Impermanence is the opposite of that. So waking up to the truth means waking up to a higher reality, higher truth. But that higher truth or reality is not impermanence. That higher truth or reality is Brahman. Absolute, unchangeable reality, which is also the unchangeable reality of your inner nature, your essence, Atma, consciousness. So let me try to interpret then Ahmed's question. Prior to gaining enlightenment, there's a different kind of waking up. Waking up, what he calls waking up to impermanence. To me, what that means is recognizing the inability of worldly life to truly give you lasting contentment and peace. That's a kind of waking up. You get it. you get, oh my gosh, I've been trying so hard to find peace and contentment through worldly activities, and now I get it. It's impossible. No matter how hard I try, it's like chasing the horizon. The horizon is always receding. No matter how hard I try, I will never find perfect peace and contentment in life. That's kind of, we'll call it a minor realization. It's not enlightenment, but it is a crucial step of understanding on the path to enlightenment. And Ahmed says that this breaks immersion in life that used to bring joy. That happens sometimes for some people and to different extent. If you have been, I don't know, just imagine. You don't have to imagine. You have all been there. The word is disillusionment. You think something is really crucial, and you pursue it so intensely, and sooner or later, often later, you find out it's not what you thought it would be. You become disillusioned. That disillusionment is painful. Absolutely painful. But wouldn't you say it's a good kind of pain? It's like you're coming out of an illusion so that you can pursue something that's more authentic, more legitimate, more real. So we'll call this in Sanskrit the term is vairagya. Vairagya means dispassion, but a particular kind of dispassion. We call it viveka janma vairagya. Vairagya, a dispassion that is viveka janya. It is born from the discernment of the inability of worldly activities to produce perfect peace and contentment. That vairagya is a kind of disillusionment, but I would call it an extremely important and necessary kind of disillusionment. Can it bring some loss of joy in life? Yeah. Think about an alcoholic, a bad example, but an alcoholic who gets so much, they're numbing their pain with that alcohol. When you take that alcohol away from them, they feel worse. In the long run, of course, it'll be so much better, but there's some pain involved in that process of healing. Maybe it's not such a bad metaphor. I've never used this before. Let me just try it. It's fun just to try new ideas, new metaphors. Every person starts off with an addiction, not to alcohol, an addiction to gaining contentment through worldly activities. That's an addiction. Who is not addicted to gaining pleasure through worldly activities? That's it. And I would call that, from a Vedantic perspective, we'll call that an addiction. Why is an addiction? Because perfect peace and contentment isn't available through worldly activities any more than freedom from pain is available through drinking. When you give up the drink, you have to deal with the pain. But you're on the right path. And in the same way, when you recognize the limitations of what can be accomplished through worldly activities, there's some pain in that recognition, some disillusionment. But it's like you're coming out of an addiction and you're going in the right direction. Next question here from Arju. Arju lives in Seattle. a little long. I glanced at this before. Let me summarize. Arju had an event where he suddenly fell unconscious. And he said he was caught before he hit his head on the floor. I don't remember any sensations, no pain, no experience. All I remember that I was sitting, and then I don't know if he woke up in the hospital or where. So he said there was no memory, nothing at all from that interim period between closing my eyes and opening my eyes. And during that time there was, and here's where the Vedanta comes in, there was nothing during that time. There was no memories, and he says there was no self-shining me. And this is what we have to talk about. I can't relate it, that's why I can't relate that experience to the reflective state of samadhi that I've been able to achieve briefly. So how to correlate, here's a question, how to correlate this experience with the teachings of Vedanta, that consciousness is always shining. Okay, so he had, and I hope Arju recovered well. Obviously that was a health emergency. He fell unconscious, and I hope and presume that he received good treatment and he recovered well. Medically, it's coma. And there are different, our medical friends have different levels of coma, but this is in a sufficient state of coma. You have no experience, no memory, etc., just as Arju describes it. Obviously, that's absolutely different from a meditative state of having a quiet mind or samadhi. There's no connection at all. But I think the heart of Arju's question is when he said, in that state of unconsciousness, medical coma, there was no self-shining me. Now that's a conclusion. That's Arju's conclusion. That's not a fact. So why would I say it? There are several ways of answering this. First of all, and just trying to think of the best way to approach this. It really is the same issue as in deep sleep, dreamless sleep. It's an experience of nothing. In fact, I think Arju, I hope, would agree that if I ask what is the difference between your experience in deep sleep and your experience of a coma, how would you differentiate those conditions? I don't think there's any way to differentiate. So let us, instead of trying to talk about coma, since that's not very familiar to us, let's shift it and talk about deep sleep. And many of you have heard my explanations of deep sleep before. It's such an important topic and so much misunderstood. And the fact is, there are two ways of understanding deep sleep. One is consciousness blinks off. That's one explanation. The other is consciousness continues unchanging, but your mind blinks off. Which is it? It's that simple. Either the light bulb went off. Actually, here, use this, and the metaphor, the example you may have heard me give before. If you're standing in a perfectly dark room with your eyes wide open and you don't see anything, how to explain that experience in the dark room of not seeing anything? There are two ways of explaining it. One is when you went into that dark room, you lost your eyesight. That's one explanation. Logically possible, right? When you entered the the dark room, or when they turned off the lights or whatever, simultaneously your eyes stopped functioning. And that would explain your experience. The other way of explaining it, of course, is that you can see perfectly well. There's nothing that can be seen. You can see, but there's nothing to be seen. Now, here's the trick to really answering Arju's question. In that dark room, could you determine which it is? Could you determine whether you have the power of sight and there's nothing to be seen? Or could you determine somehow that you are blind and everything is there available to be seen? At that moment, there's no way of exploring it. So just as in deep sleep, did consciousness blink off or did your mind cease to function? In deep sleep, there's no way of explaining it. When you wake up, then we can think about it. And now, how do we think about it? Of course, we know that the ancient rishis made this discovery, but set that aside. The ancient rishis discovered this reality in a way that you may not be able to discover it anyway. Set that aside. Let's just use logic. Using pure logic, could you prove one or the other? When you wake up, using logic and logic alone, no Vedas, no Rishis, no Upanishads, no Swami Tadatmananda, nothing. So you wake up from deep sleep, using logic alone, could you prove, logically, whether or not consciousness remained or not? And the honest answer to that is, you can't prove. You have no basis for using logic in that situation. But you can use logic in a slightly different way. I don't want to go off on a big tangent, but some of you know that modern physics is based on this quantum theory. Quantum theory is a theory of probability, which says that Swami Tadatmananda is probably in this chair. But simultaneously, there's a large possibility that he's here, there's a smaller possibility he's here, and there's a minute possibility he's over there. Honestly, this is how quantum theory explains particles. I'm not kidding you. This is quantum theory explaining particles. Probably here, possibly there, and perhaps way over there. Anyway, we won't go into detail. So anyway, look at this from the standpoint of probability. This is where I'm going with this silly argument. Here's the thing. In that dark room, tell me, you're standing there in the pure blackness. You can't prove one or the other. Are you blind? In fact, I'm standing next to you and I ask you, are you blind? I don't know. How to find out? Well, here's where the logic of probability comes. Tell me, your eyes have functioned more or less properly for how long? From infancy onwards? Did you ever go blind before? No? Never? No. Then tell me, what is the likelihood that you suddenly went blind in this dark room? And then to make it more improbable, when you go out of the room, your eyesight suddenly returns. You see how improbable that argument is. It's not proof. Is it possible that you became blind when you went in the room? Yes. Is it possible that you miraculously got your eyesight back when you left the room? It is possible, but it is so incredibly unlikely. That argument applies perfectly to consciousness. You are conscious of every minute change going on in your mind and body from moment to moment to moment for days, for weeks, decades. And then suddenly that consciousness blinks off and blinks back on. It's just incredibly unlikely. Now please note, this is not a proof. I'm just using logic. Ultimately, we put it in a bigger context where we include the teachings of the ancient rishis. So then we remove all uncertainty whatsoever, making use of those teachings. But this is just to show, using pure logic, that we can handle that question. So what happened to Arju is unfortunate, but in that coma, this is just to finish the argument. If I were to ask Arju, in that state of coma, how do you know that you didn't experience anything? That's a tricky question. Think about it. In that coma, how do you know you didn't experience anything? And that question shows the possibility that Arju has made a wrong conclusion. That in that state of coma, consciousness remained 100% present. But the mind, brain being in a state of coma, there was nothing to be experienced. Okay, we take just one or two more questions and we'll conclude. Next question from Neil. Neil lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, please keep the questions a little shorter. Okay, let me try to summarize some of this. Relating with Ishvara. Why and I'm just going to paraphrase Neil. Why should we be grateful to Ishvara, since Ishvara is, pardon me for putting words in Neil's mouth, but I think there's way too much to discuss here. So, why should we be grateful to Ishvara if Ishvara is karma paladatta and he is merely giving us the results of deeds that we ourselves committed? So he's not doing you any favors, so to speak. He is just giving you what you've earned. It's like you work hard all week long and you get a paycheck. Do you send a thank you note to your boss? If you want a promotion, maybe you do. But you get my point. You worked hard for your paycheck, and you don't need to write a thank you note. Converse is also true. When we are dealing with extraordinarily difficult situations, are we merely receiving the fruits of our own actions? So then why blame Ishvara? Can we leave Ishvara completely out of the picture? And this is where he's going here. What does Ishvara have to do with anything? Ultimately, we are the one creating our own experiences, blah, blah, blah. I see so many people thanking Ishvara or praying, etc. Is this an exercise in futility? Are we merely getting what we deserve? Have I inadvertently reached the non-theistic conclusion that is seen in Buddhism on this issue? Please help me understand the Advaita Vedantic perspective. Okay, and I think Neil's perspective here absolutely needs to be taken seriously. It's legitimate. You know, why should I believe in Ishvara? Can the existence of Ishvara be proven? Along with the doctrine of karma, we can logically prove a source of the universe. That's not hard. But that's not what we mean by Ishvara. Ishvara as a conscious being whose intelligence matters, whose intelligence makes the world function. That conscious being cannot be proven. And if anyone chooses not to believe in Ishvara, fine. The Buddhists won't accept that definition of Ishvara, and no problem. They get along just fine with the doctrine of karma without Ishvara. By the way, I won't go, anyway, lots of details. In modern times, a very common kind of philosophical thinking is to deconstruct whatever are the ideas we encounter. Deconstruct means logically pick it apart and show the fallacy, show the emptiness of whatever that idea is. Is it possible to deconstruct Ishvara using logic? Absolutely. Buddhists have done it very well. Atheists have done it very well. And by the way, it's pretty easy to deconstruct the God of the Bible. I mean, I'd have no problem deconstructing the biblical concept of God. To me, it doesn't work at all. But now the question is, what about deconstructing our Vedantic concept of Ishvara? Please notice I said Vedantic concept of Ishvara. We're not talking about Shiva and Vishnu and all the deities, etc. That's not our discussion. Our discussion is on the Vedantic concept of Ishvara as creator, sustainer, destroyer, and especially karma pala datta, which is what Neil refers to here. Can that God be deconstructed using modern philosophical and logical methods? Absolutely. And if that's your inclination, I'll respect it. What I would do, though, is point out, what do you get out of that deconstruction? How does it help you? Let me take this, and by the way, we'll make this the last question, but here's actually this is a very poignant way of answering it. Think of someone you really love. Let's do a logical deconstruction. They're made of flesh and bone. What's inside their bodies? In fact, there are lots of commentaries that like to talk about inside the gut. There are all feces inside your body. You open it up, it's stinking. Isn't that true of your loved one? So we could do a logical deconstruction of the physical body of your loved one. How about the mind? Is your loved one a saint? Have they ever made mistakes? Have they ever hurt your feelings? Have they ever done nasty things? So we can go on talking about your loved one and doing this deconstruction. My point, and it's all true. Inside the body is stinking filth. Inside the mind is some kind of problem as well. But what is the benefit from that kind of philosophical deconstruction? Not only is it no benefit, it's harmful. It's harmful. You have a relationship with your loved one. That relationship is meant to be nurtured, not deconstructed. By nurturing that relationship, you are benefited. I'll say that again. By nurturing your relationship with your loved ones, You are benefited, your loved one also, but talking about you. You stand to benefit by nurturing your relationship with your loved one. And I would say this argument applies perfectly to Ishvara. Anyone and anything can be logically deconstructed. To what value? On the other hand, to nurture your relationship with Ishvara has tremendous benefits. And fortunately, the teachings of Vedanta can allow you to do that without sacrificing reason. This is the last point I'm going to make. In other religious traditions, in order to establish a relationship with God, in other religions you have to sacrifice reason because what they teach is unreasonable. It's just unreasonable. The God of the Bible is not a reasonable God. So you have to sacrifice reason, you have to resort to blind faith. Just accept. What I find is so amazing about not Hinduism, because there's a lot of blind faith in Hinduism, but our Vedantic understanding of Ishvara is in order to cultivate a relationship with Ishvara, you need not sacrifice reason. And to me, that's absolutely unique. So here, instead of using reason to deconstruct Ishvara, you can actually use reason to cultivate a relationship and understanding of Ishvara which will benefit you tremendously. Okay, that's a heavy question. I hope my comments were helpful. A few more questions, but I think this would be a good place to conclude. We'll take more questions next time, and you can send me the questions by email. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om. That's it. See you next time.